Let's go to my next guest, Darren Grimes. He's a Reform UK councillor, deputy leader of Durham County Council. I don't know why it still tickles me. You've got that job now, Darren. Lovely to speak to you.
Lovely to speak to you too, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk Rachel Reeves. Should she resign? And if so, should she resign over not getting the licence she had to get to rent out her property when she moved into Downing Street, when she became Chancellor? Or should she resign because, well, if and when she breaks those manifesto pledges on not raising income tax, national insurance and VAT in the budget in a month's time? Or either or both, should she go?
Yeah, well, the whole panoply that is being enforced upon us. Look, Julia, ultimately, I actually wonder if Rachel Reeves will be finding out how difficult the Labour Party has made it to actually survive in everything from being a landlord to being self-employed. I get contacted by so many people who say that Labour's new plans and proposals, the law being changed on renters' rights, will actually mean that the landlord has absolutely no right to get out a bad tenant.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I can only hope that Rachel Reeves has one of those, because then maybe she'll get a real taste for what the red tape and bureaucracy that they're forcing upon the nation is actually doing to the country.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, her defence, she didn't know about, like, for instance, this licence. You know, you think, well, I wouldn't have known about it other than the fact that, you know, she's campaigned for it in her constituency in Leeds, so she did know about it.
She literally tweeted about it.
Yeah, so we were reading the tweet out, and only 10 days ago, you'd think she might have gone, oh, and, you know, her husband is a permanent secretary of the civil service. You know, we've had quite a few callers very angry about this. I mean, I woke up to this story this morning, I thought, oh, is this a big deal? Come on. And there was we had a bit of a question mark, didn't we, about, you know, Angela Rayner early on about, well, were you supposed to have paid more of that stamp duty or not? And actually it comes down to just a sort of slack, you know, not paying attention to detail, kind of the sort of thing we'd expect a chancellor certainly to do, and thinking, obviously, I can probably get away with this. It just has that feel about it, doesn't it?
It does. And as I say, you know, the landlords, the renters, the working people, they would get fined, they would get blacklisted, they would get evicted. And that's when they slip up once, right? She will get away with it. It looks like rules for thee, but not for me. And ultimately, this is from, perhaps, Julia, you and I would be a lot less bothered about the lack of the hypocrisy, the lack of moral clarity here, if the Labour Party hadn't waxed lyrical throughout the years in which you were a lone voice against lockdown, rallying against it for the safety and sanctity of our public's, you know, mental health and well-being, that actually they wax lyrical every single damn day about how breaches of the rules meant that they had to go. You know, they had this moral high horse that was so far up that we plebs could only look on from down below.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And remember when Starmer, when he arrived in Downing Street and he spoke outside, not on the step, really annoys me. No one speaks on the steps of Downing Street. And he stood outside and he was talking about how, you know, the integrity and all of this, and they were going to be, you know, more morally sort of upright, and it just collapsed. I mean, minister after minister, after special advisor, after official, it's just completely and utterly falling apart. And today, in the last half hour or so, the Prime Minister's official spokesman has told journalists in a briefing that the Prime Minister continues to have confidence in the Chancellor, despite her inadvertent breach of housing law, says she acted with urgency to rectify her mistake and no further action is required. Now, continues to have confidence. He had confidence in Lord Mandelson and he had confidence in Angela Rayner, and days later they were gone. Interestingly, he doesn't say full confidence.
No, indeed, yeah, and that ultimately is a political kiss of death. You know, I think that's Keir Starmer actually saying that he doesn't have complete confidence. I think ultimately, if you are the person that's in charge for setting regulatory policy when it comes to the economy, you should really be getting these kinds of things right. You know, it really is as basic as that. So I think there are fundamental questions to be asked about competence, but there are questions about competence to be asked across the piece. You know, I don't think this is a country that's going to do very well out of further tax increases come the budget. And, you know, issues that we're talking about on a local level, Julia, they're kicking down the can down the road on everything from children with high needs to, you know, out of school, home to school transport costs. They're not willing to talk about those things, but they are willing to say that we as taxpayers need to pay even more. When people, I've never seen people struggle more in my lifetime, Julia.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk so much on the show about, you know, the lanyard class is totally out of touch. They've got their public sector pension, their public sector lives. They may not be high earners, but they've never had to struggle to run a business. We've got a lot of people, it's interesting, in cabinet and or, you know, senior Labour figures who grew up, you know, like you know, a single parent household, and you talked about how much that has impacted your life in terms of the struggles, you know, on one income and parents and families trying to make ends meet. And yet they seem to be utterly out of touch with, you know, the average family working hard who were just literally running to just sort of, you know, stay afloat right now with price increases. You know, you're getting less food for, you know, for more money, rents, mortgages, you travel, your car, everything you buy now is so much more expensive than it was just a few years ago. People are really, really struggling, and we're being told you're going to have your taxes going up. Meanwhile, we've got a few million people doing sod all, sitting on their backsides all day.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, she is proposing that actually we tax you more while she looks like the elite renting out a Dulwich home. You know,
38 grand a year. 38 grand a year. That's like average salary.
It is, of course it is. I mean, the optics are absolutely appalling, and it's the privileged paying for exemptions. That's the look here. So, you know, I say to work in Britain that it's time to wake up. The purported representatives of the working class, the Labour Party, well, they won't rule out tax rises because they're ready to squeeze you like a pulp. You know, I noticed, Julia, that they're already rolling back on the ban on North Sea oil and gas. You know, they've realised clearly that Miliband is off his sodding rocker. Sorry, Julia, if I can use that word at this time. But look...
What, Miliband? Don't you dare say that word on this show.
But look, people are really, really struggling, and I don't think actually things are ever going to get better under this lot, and it's going to be one hell of a task once they're out of office. And as you said, Julia, I hope she's going to be able to get those residents out of her home, because she'll be needing it soon enough.
Yeah, well, exactly. And again, I think the Prime Minister's keeping her there because he knows he's going to have to get rid of her after the backlash over this budget coming. I have to say, you mentioned Ed Miliband. I was at a Parliamentarian of the Year Awards at the Spectator magazine. It was great fun, but lots of senior politicians. I was sitting with your party leader, Nigel Farage, but also on the other side, a young man who works as a special advisor to one Ed Miliband, who said, I think I'm the victim. He actually said to me, I think I may be the victim of a joke tonight, putting me next to you. And I'm like, hello, do enjoy. Let's have a selfie and send it to the boss. Hi, Ed. Apparently he sent his greetings back, so that's nice. But anyway...
Did they provide a safe space, Julia?
Yeah, I know. He coped very well, I thought. I must ask you, just finally also about a story we mentioned a bit earlier. And this is a concern about, and this is something you've spoken up a lot about, because we've had a lot of worries about blasphemy law coming in this country to protect one particular religion, the religion of Islam. But Christians in Britain are basically not enjoying free speech anymore, according to a man, Felix Ngoli, who claims he was discriminated against when he missed out on a job because of his views on homosexuality. He applied to be a mental health support worker with Touchstone Leeds, based in Wakefield and West Yorkshire, back in 2022. He was offered the job, but the offer was then withdrawn after they found out that he had views. I mean, he was at university back a few years earlier, which basically is, you know, he views homosexuality and same-sex marriage as sins. Now, I know you and I do not share that view, but do we defend his right to hold those views and work in any job he darn well chooses?
It effectively, Julia, precludes Christians from entering the workplace. That's what
I would have thought Muslims as well.
Does.
That's pretty fundamental, isn't it, to Islam as well?
Because that would be Islamophobic. You can't possibly do that.
I did not get the memo.
Christians, totally fine. Christians, totally fine. Fair game, fair game. Look, ultimately, I think what this says is that stating a biblical view that homosexuality is a sin, and a court actually expressing the right that you should have free speech, and the freedom of religion has been breached in cases like this. But Julia, what gets me is that you can happily take to the streets chanting about jihad or intifada. You saw the scenes of the masked men who intimidated people, and the police and others barely blink. I imagine the workforces would barely blink. But when it comes to a Christian championing their views at university or whatever else, well, then that's a faith matter too far. But if you're a radical inciting violence and all these other things, I just see this as, it's not tolerance, Julia, it's double standards.
And as long as he's not imposing his views on people in the workplace, either people he's helping with mental health or his colleagues, those just are his views, it's no one's sodding business.
No, it's not. I mean, how many members of the civil service vote for the Labour Party? You know, if they're doing their job and keeping themselves to themselves, impartiality matters and all the rest of it, then fine. I know far too many of them aren't doing that. But ultimately, you know, we cannot go down a road where speaking your faith means risking financial ruin and being blacklisted from the economy.
Again, even if we, and I'm sure we both do, completely disagree with those particular views. Darren Grimes, always good to talk to you, Deputy Leader of Durham County Council.